The Gate Without a Gate. The young Renji had traveled great distances to find Master Sogen, whose reputation for wisdom had reached even the most remote lands. With his heart burning with the desire to understand Zen, he arrived at the monastery nestled among mist-covered mountains. After a long wait at the entrance, he was finally led before the master. Master Sogen, I have come seeking enlightenment. How can I enter the path of Zen? The old man observed him in silence for a moment before responding with an enigmatic smile. Find the gate that has no gate. Renji was bewildered. A gate without a gate? He did not understand, but he decided to stay at the monastery, hoping the truth would be revealed to him. The test of patience. Days passed, and Renji was assigned seemingly absurd tasks. Sogen instructed him to sweep leaves in a forest where the wind never ceased to blow, write sutras in the sand that the river washed away, and carry water in a bucket with holes. His frustration grew, and he finally confronted the master. Master, what is the purpose of these tasks? They do not bring me closer to Zen. They only confuse me more. Sogen simply smiled and replied, when water is poured into a container, it takes its shape. When the mind clings, it gets lost in illusion. Confused but determined, Renji continued his training. However, impatience dominated him each day. Every action seemed useless and meaningless. One day, Sogen instructed him to meditate by the river until he understood the nature of water. For hours, Renji watched the current flow between the rocks, changing direction effortlessly, dissolving without resistance. Then, in a moment of clarity, he understood. The essence of water is not to fight against the course but to adapt to it. The trials of winter. During a harsh winter, a sick monk required care. Renji spent weeks attending to his brother without question, feeling an unfamiliar peace in doing so. For the first time, he stopped thinking about himself and found joy in serving another. Later, a snowstorm trapped him in the mountains while gathering firewood. Facing his own fear of death, he remembered Sogen's words, "The mind that clings, suffers." Accepting his fate, the storm ceased, and he found his way back to the monastery. That night, while meditating in the candlelight, Renji felt an emptiness within himself. Not as a loss, but as an opening to something greater. For the first time, he glimpsed the truth of Zen. Stop resisting the present moment. The revelation. One morning, while sweeping the temple courtyard, the wind suddenly blew open the great wooden gate. At that moment, Renji understood. Enlightenment was not in the search, but in ceasing to search. The gate he had been trying to pass through had never existed. Zen was simply being present. Years later, Renji became a master. A new disciple arrived at the monastery with the same question. Master, how can I enter the path of Zen? Renji smiled and replied, Find the gate that has no gate, the awakening of a new disciple. Years passed, and Renji observed how his disciple followed the same path of doubt, frustration, and questioning. However, he also witnessed his growth, how his actions became more fluid, and his mind more serene. One day, in the middle of an intense rainstorm, the disciple was drenched as he tried to keep a lamp lit in the temple. The rain pounded his face, and his effort seemed useless. But in that instant, he stopped struggling and simply allowed the rain and the wind to be what they were. The lamp went out, but inside him, a new light shone. He understood, just as Renji once had, that the gate had never existed. With a smile on his face, he returned to his master. Master, the gate without a gate has disappeared. Renji smiled and nodded. Then you have entered, beyond understanding. However, the disciple's learning did not end there. As was tradition in the monastery, he was given new tasks, this time to deepen his understanding of Zen. Renji assigned him to tend to the temple garden, a small space full of stones and moss where time seemed to stand still. For the first few days, the disciple tried to make the garden perfect. He moved the stones, trimmed the plants precisely, and swept the leaves every morning. But each day, the wind scattered more leaves, moss grew in unexpected places, and the stones seemed to shift with the rain. Frustrated, he went to Renji. "Master, no matter how much I try to keep the garden perfect, it always returns to chaos." Renji looked at the garden and then at his disciple. "Isn't it beautiful as it is?" The disciple fell silent. He observed the garden not as something to be controlled, but as something that simply existed. For the first time, he stopped trying to fix it and just sat down to contemplate. As months passed, Renji gave him new tasks that seemed meaningless. Listening to the sound of water throughout an entire night, sitting at the temple gate without moving until dawn broke the darkness, writing a sutra in the wind with his hand. Each of these tests, far from giving him answers, showed him that there was nothing to attain. There was only being present, the infinite path. Years later, the disciple left the monastery to continue his own journey. Before departing, he asked Renji, "Master, what should I do now?" Renji smiled and replied, "Keep walking, but seek nothing." And so, the disciple became a traveler without a destination, a man who had understood that enlightenment was not a point of arrival, but the act of walking without burdens. The wisdom of Sogen lived on in Renji, and now in his disciple, who one day would also become a master and repeat the same teaching.